Lin Mei lived in a small village nestled at the foot of Huangshan Mountain. The locals called it Eagle's Rest, a place where time seemed to move slower than in the bustling cities beyond. At 23, Lin Mei wasn't much different from other young women her age, except perhaps in the weight of responsibility she carried on her narrow shoulders. Every morning, she would wake before the sun touched the mountain peaks. The small wooden house she shared with her grandmother creaked as she moved about, careful not to disturb the old woman's sleep. Grandmother Zhang had been bedridden for nearly 2 years now, her joints swollen with arthritis and her lungs weakened by decades of cooking over wood fires. Another day, another blessing, Lin Mei would whisper to herself as she splashed cold water on her face from the basin by the door. This morning ritual reminded her to be grateful. Even when their rice jar grew dangerously empty, or when her grandmother's medicine became too expensive, the village was poor, but the mountain was rich with stories, with herbs, with tourists who came to marvel at its famous peaks shrouded in mist. Lin Mei had learned to make a living from both. 3 days a week she guided visitors along the safer paths of Huangshan, translating the mountain secrets into simple tales that delighted foreigners. The other days, she ventured deeper into the forest alone, gathering herbs that she either sold to traditional medicine shops or used for her grandmother's treatments. "You have your mother's eyes and your father's stubborn heart," Grandmother Zhang often told her. Lin Mei barely remembered her parents. They had left for factory jobs in the city when she was 7 and died in the same factory fire 3 years later. All she had of them was an old photograph and the determination they had passed down to her. The neighbors often whispered about her when she passed. "That poor girl," they would say, thinking she couldn't hear, working herself to the bone for the old woman. No time to find a husband, no money for a better life. But Lin Mei never saw herself as poor in money perhaps, but rich in other ways. Rich in the knowledge of which moss could stop bleeding, which bark could reduce fever. Rich in the songs her grandmother had taught her. Rich in the friendship of the mountain itself, which seemed to protect her on her solitary journeys through its forests. That particular day had begun like any other. Lin Mei had guided a group of Australian tourists halfway up the mountain, pointing out medicinal plants and telling ancient legends about the strangely shaped rocks. The tourists had tipped her generously, impressed by her knowledge and cheerful spirit despite the obvious patches on her clothes and the worn thin soles of her hiking shoes. As they parted ways at the main tourist center, dark clouds had begun gathering above the peaks. Most guides would have headed straight home, but Lin Mei saw an opportunity. Rain meant the special white fungus that grew on fallen logs would be swelling with moisture, easier to spot and more valuable at the market. Grandmother's cough medicine was almost gone and they needed the extra money. Just a quick detour, she promised herself, leaving the tourist path and heading into the denser part of the forest. The first droplets of rain were already pattering on the broad leaves above her head as she filled her basket with treasures. The white fungus, some wild ginger root, a handful of bright red berries known to soothe sore throats. The rain grew heavier, but Lin Mei knew these paths blindfolded, or so she thought. As she rounded a bend in the trail, the ground suddenly grew unfamiliar. A recent landslide had changed the landscape, forcing her to find another way down. That's when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the mountain. Not the crack of thunder or the rustle of leaves, but the screech of tires and the sickening crunch of metal hitting stone. Lin Mei froze, her basket clutched to her chest. The sound had come from below, where the narrow mountain road snaked its way up from the valley. Without thinking twice, she abandoned her usual caution and scrambled down the steep slope, using roots and rocks as handholds. The rain had turned to a downpour now, plastering her long black hair to her face and neck. Her clothes were soaked through, mud coating her hands and feet as she slid down the final few meters onto the road. Through the curtain of rain, she could make out the crumpled form of what had once been an expensive car. Its front end was wrapped around a boulder, steam hissing from the ruined engine. "Hello?" she called out, approaching carefully. "Is anyone there? Are you hurt?" At first she thought the car might be empty, that whoever had been driving had already gone for help. But then she spotted him. A man had been thrown clear of the vehicle, lying motionless on the rocky ground about 10 meters away. He wasn't moving. Lin Mei ran to him, her heart pounding. She had seen injuries before, Cuts from careless hikers, broken bones from falls, but nothing like this. The man lay face down, his expensive suit torn and bloody, one arm bent at an unnatural angle. "Sir?" She knelt beside him, rainwater pooling around her knees. "Can you hear me?" When he didn't respond, she carefully placed 2 fingers against his neck, the way she'd once seen a doctor do at the village clinic. A pulse, weak but steady. He was alive. With gentle movements, she rolled him onto his back, supporting his head. His face was pale beneath streaks of blood from a deep gash on his forehead. He looked to be in his late 30s, with features that spoke of city life and good food, so different from the weathered faces of her village. Lin Mei glanced up and down the empty road. No other cars, no help in sight. The nearest village was over an hour's walk, and the rain showed no signs of stopping. Night would fall soon, and with it the mountain's dangerous drop in temperature. "I'll help you," she said to the unconscious man, though she wasn't sure he could hear her. "You'll be okay." Thinking quickly, she tore strips from the bottom of her shirt, already ruined by mud and rain, and bound the wound on his head to stop the bleeding. Next, she checked for other injuries, wincing when she found his ribs bruised and possibly broken beneath his once crisp white shirt. The man groaned, his eyelids fluttering but not opening. Lin Mei bit her lip, weighing her options. She couldn't leave him here in the rain, but she couldn't carry him far either. Then she remembered. Just a little further down the road was an old shepherd's cave used during summer months when herders brought their goats to graze on the lower slopes. "Just hold on," she told the stranger. "I'm going to move you someplace dry." It took all her strength to half-drag, half-carry the man down the muddy road. He was much heavier than the bundles of firewood she was used to carrying, and each time he moaned in pain she paused, afraid of hurting him further. The rain continued to pour, thunder now rumbling overhead, turning the simple task into an epic struggle. By the time they reached the cave, Lin Mei's muscles were screaming in protest. The small hollow in the mountainside wasn't much, just deep enough to get out of the rain and wind, but it would have to do. She carefully laid the man on the driest patch of ground and collapsed beside him, catching her breath for just a moment before forcing herself back to her feet. Outside, she gathered what she could: branches for a fire, certain leaves known for their pain-relieving properties, a handful of the berries from her now-lost basket that had scattered in her pockets. Returning to the cave, she worked quickly, using the flint and steel she always carried to spark a small fire near the entrance. As the flames cast flickering shadows on the cave walls, Lin Mei turned her attention back to the stranger. In the firelight, she could see him more clearly. The fine cut of his suit now ruined by mud and blood, the expensive watch still clinging to his wrist, the polished shoes that had never been meant for mountain paths. "Who are you?" she wondered aloud, using rainwater collected in a large leaf to clean his face. "And what were you doing on this road alone?" She didn't expect an answer, and she didn't get one. Instead, she focused on what she could do, applying crushed herbs to his head wound, binding his ribs with torn cloth, keeping the fire going as night descended fully upon the mountain. Throughout that long night, Lin Mei never slept. She kept watch over the stranger, checking his breathing, adding wood to the fire, singing softly the old songs her grandmother had taught her. Once, when he seemed to be shivering despite the fire's warmth, she took off her only dry layer, a thin jacket she'd kept in her waterproof bag, and placed it over him. Outside, the storm raged on. Lightning illuminated the cave mouth in brilliant flashes, followed by thunder that shook small stones from the ceiling. Yet inside, in that small bubble of warmth and flickering light, Lin Mei continued her vigil, unaware that the simple act of compassion she was performing would soon change everything she had ever known. The rain continued to pour as the night grew deeper. Lin Mei kept the small fire alive, feeding it dry twigs from the back of the cave where previous visitors had left a small pile. The stranger's breathing had steadied, but he still hadn't opened his eyes. Every few minutes she would check his pulse, her fingers gentle against his neck. "You're going to be fine," she whispered, more to comfort herself than him. "The storm will pass by morning." Around midnight, the man began to stir. First came small movements, fingers twitching, head turning slightly. Then a low groan escaped his lips and his eyes fluttered open, confused and unfocused. "Don't move too quickly," Lin Mei said, leaning into his field of vision. "You've been hurt." The man blinked several times, wincing as awareness of pain seemed to return to him. "Where?" His voice was hoarse, barely audible above the storm. "You're in a cave on Huangshan Mountain. Your car crashed on the road below. I found you and brought you here." She offered him water collected in a broad leaf. "Can you drink?" He tried to sit up but gasped at the pain in his ribs. Lin Mei quickly supported his head, helping him take small sips. "Thank you," he managed to say before closing his eyes again, clearly exhausted by even this small effort. Lin Mei sat back on her heels, studying his face. In the firelight, she could see he was handsome in a way different from the village men. His features were sharper, his skin smoother, unmarked by years of sun and wind. A city man, without doubt, perhaps a businessman or government official given his expensive clothes. Throughout the night, he drifted in and out of consciousness. During one lucid moment, he opened his eyes fully and seemed to really see her for the first time. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice stronger now. "My name is Lin Mei. I'm a guide from the village below." "Wei," he replied simply. "My name is Wei." "Rest, Mr. Wei. We can't leave until morning, and you need to save your strength." He seemed about to say something more, but instead nodded slightly and closed his eyes again. As dawn approached, the rain finally began to ease. The first pale light of morning filtered through the cave entrance, revealing just how small and humble their shelter had been. Lin Mei stepped outside, stretching her stiff limbs and surveying the damage from the storm. Fallen branches littered the road, and in places, small mudslides had covered portions of the pavement. When she returned to the cave, she found Wei awake and attempting to sit up. "Careful," she warned, hurrying to his side. "Your ribs might be broken." "I need to call my driver," he said, patting his pockets with a grimace of pain. "My phone, I checked yesterday. It was damaged in the crash, but now that the storm has passed, I can go for help." She hesitated. "Can you stay alone for a while?" "I'll be as quick as I can." Wei nodded, leaning back against the cave wall. "I've caused you enough trouble." "You've done more than enough already." Lin Mei smiled. "It's no trouble. Anyone would have done the same." But as she turned to leave, Wei caught her wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong for someone so injured. "No," he said quietly. "Not anyone. Tell me, why did you help me? You risked your safety in that storm. You gave up your jacket." He nodded toward the garment still draped across his legs. Lin Mei felt her face grow warm under his intense gaze. "My grandmother always says we must honor the mountain by helping those in need on it. The mountain gives us life, so we must give back when we can." She gently pulled her hand away. "I'll be back soon with help." The journey down the mountain was treacherous. Twice Lin Mei nearly slipped on mud-slicked paths, and once she had to backtrack entirely when she found the usual route blocked by fallen trees. By the time she reached the main road where phone service was available, nearly 2 hours had passed. She approached a roadside tea shop where the owner, Old Chen, was already sweeping flood debris from his entrance. "Lin Mei, what happened to you? You look like you slept in the forest." Old Chen exclaimed, taking in her mud-stained clothes and exhausted face. Quickly, she explained about the crashed car and the injured man in the cave. Old Chen immediately offered his phone, and Lin Mei realized she didn't know who to call. "He mentioned a driver," she said, biting her lip. "He said his name is Wei, but nothing more." "Check his car for information," Old Chen suggested. "Rich men always have business cards." Lin Mei nodded and hurried to the nearest police station instead. The local officer, Officer Tang, listened to her story with growing concern. "A car crash up there? And you carried him to a cave? By yourself?" He shook his head in disbelief. "That was dangerous, girl. Next time, leave it to the professionals." But despite his scolding, Officer Tang immediately called for an emergency response team and asked Lin Mei to guide them back to the cave. As they drove up the mountain in his police vehicle, Lin Mei felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief that Wei would get proper medical care, worry about his condition, and an odd sense of loss. As if a brief but important chapter in her life was coming to a close. When they reached the spot where Wei's car had crashed, they found a sleek black SUV already parked nearby. A tall man in a dark suit was examining the wreckage with a phone pressed to his ear. "That must be his driver," Lin Mei whispered to Officer Tang as they pulled up. The man turned sharply at the sound of their vehicle, his face tense with worry. "Are you the local police?" "Have you found Mr. Wei?" Officer Tang stepped out. "We believe so. This young woman helped him during the storm." The man's eyes widened as he looked at Lin Mei. You found him? Is he alive? Is he hurt? He's alive, Lin Mei assured him. But injured. He needs a doctor. I can show you where he is. Within minutes, a flurry of activity erupted. The man who introduced himself only as Zhao called someone else who apparently dispatched a helicopter. More vehicles arrived, including an ambulance that attempted to navigate the damaged road. Lin Mei led a small group, including Zhao, Officer Tang, and a doctor back to the cave. The journey that had taken her 2 difficult hours was completed in just 40 minutes, with their equipment and knowledge of alternate routes. When they reached the cave, Wei was sitting up looking pale but alert. His face brightened visibly when he saw Lin Mei. You came back, he said simply. Of course. She stepped aside as the doctor rushed forward. What followed was a whirlwind of activity. The doctor examined Wei, confirming Lin Mei's suspicion of broken ribs and adding a mild concussion to the list of injuries. He praised her first aid efforts, especially the herbal poultice she had applied to Wei's head wound. This prevented infection, the doctor said, nodding approvingly. Old mountain medicine sometimes works better than our fancy drugs. Throughout the examination, Wei's eyes kept finding Lin Mei, who stood awkwardly at the edge of the group. She felt suddenly out of place among these efficient city people with their medical equipment and rapid-fire conversations into sleek phones. When they were ready to move Wei, he insisted on speaking to her first. The others stepped outside, giving them a moment of privacy. I owe you my life, Wei said. Lin Mei shook her head. You don't owe me anything. I just did what was right. Few people would define right as carrying a stranger through a thunderstorm. His voice was gentle but serious. Please let me repay you somehow. Lin Mei thought of her grandmother waiting at home, probably worried sick by now. She thought of the herbs she had lost, the money she wouldn't make today. There's no need, she said firmly. I'm just glad you'll be okay. Wei studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. At least take this. He reached into his inner jacket pocket, wincing slightly at the movement, and pulled out a business card. If you ever need anything at all, call this number. Lin Mei accepted the card without looking at it, tucking it into her pocket to be polite. Thank you, but I won't need to use it. Wei smiled for the first time, a warm, genuine smile that transformed his serious face. Perhaps not, but I would feel better knowing you have it. The others returned, and with careful movements they helped Wei to his feet. Lin Mei watched as they slowly made their way out of the cave that had been their shelter through the long night. Outside, she blinked in the sudden brightness. A helicopter was landing in a small clearing nearby, its rotors whipping the trees into a frenzy. Several more men in suits stood waiting. The scene was so far removed from her daily life that it felt almost like a dream. Officer Tang touched her arm. You should go home now. Your grandmother will be worried. Lin Mei nodded, suddenly feeling the full weight of exhaustion. As the group helped Wei toward the helicopter, he turned back once more, raising his hand in farewell. She returned the gesture, a small smile on her tired face. As she began the long walk home, the helicopter rose into the air behind her, the sound gradually fading as it flew toward the city. Lin Mei reached into her pocket and felt the smooth edge of Wei's business card but didn't take it out. Whatever world that card represented, it wasn't hers. Her world was here, the mountain, her grandmother, the simple life they shared. Little did she know that the card she carried so carelessly would soon become the key to a future she couldn't yet imagine. The journey back to her village took Lin Mei longer than usual. Her body ached from the night spent on the hard cave floor, and her mind kept replaying the strange events. The crash, the storm, the injured stranger named Wei, and the helicopter that had carried him away like something from a movie. Not real life. By the time she reached the outskirts of Eagle's Rest village, the afternoon sun was high overhead. Children played in puddles left by the storm, and women hung laundry to dry in the warm breeze. Everything looked so normal, as if the extraordinary night she'd just experienced had happened to someone else. Lin Mei, Mrs. Wang called from her doorway. Your grandmother has been asking about you all morning. We told her you must have stayed at the ranger station because of the storm. Lin Mei waved her thanks and quickened her pace, suddenly anxious to see her grandmother's face. The familiar sight of their small house with its faded blue door in the herb garden she tended so carefully brought tears to her eyes. She hadn't realized how exhausted she truly was until this moment. "Grandmother, I'm home," she called softly as she entered. The old woman was sitting up in bed, her silver hair neatly braided and her eyes bright with relief. "Child, I was so worried. Where have you been?" Lin Mei sat on the edge of the bed and took her grandmother's wrinkled hands. "There was a storm," she explained, leaving out the more frightening details. "I helped someone who was stranded. I'm sorry I couldn't let you know." Grandmother Zhang studied her face. "You look tired." "More than tired." Her wise eyes narrowed. "Something happened." Lin Mei smiled. Her grandmother had always been able to read her like an open book. Over a simple meal of leftover rice and vegetables, she told the story. The crashed car, the injured man, the cave, and the rescue. She left out how scared she had been, or how her heart had raced when Wei had looked at her with such gratitude. "And he gave you his card?" her grandmother asked when she finished. "Let me see it." Lin Mei fished the forgotten card from her pocket. She hadn't even looked at it yet. The paper was thick and smooth with gold lettering that caught the light. "Wei Liang," it read. "Chief Executive Officer, Wei Pharmaceuticals." Below that was a Shanghai address and several phone numbers. Grandmother Zhang's eyes widened. "Wei Pharmaceuticals? Child, do you know what this is?" Lin Mei shook her head. "It's one of the biggest medicine companies in China. Even I have heard of it, and I never leave this village." She handed the card back with newfound respect. "You saved an important man." Lin Mei tucked the card away again. Important or not, he needed help. Anyone would have done the same. Her grandmother smiled knowingly. Not anyone would have carried a grown man to safety in a thunderstorm. You have your father's strength and your mother's kind heart. Life gradually returned to normal. Lin Mei resumed her work as a guide, though for several days her muscles protested every steep climb. The story of her rescue spread through the village, growing more dramatic with each telling until Lin Mei hardly recognized it. By the following week, according to village gossip, she had single-handedly pulled Wei from a burning car seconds before it exploded. She said nothing to correct these tales. Let them talk. She knew the truth. It had been frightening and exhausting, not heroic. She had simply done what needed to be done. 3 weeks after the incident, Lin Mei was gathering herbs on the lower slopes when she noticed unusual activity in the village below. A convoy of black cars was making its way up the narrow road that rarely saw any vehicle fancier than Farmer Lee's rusty truck. Curiosity drew her down the path. By the time she reached the village, a small crowd had gathered in the square. 3 expensive-looking cars were parked there, and several men in suits were talking to the village head. Mr. Chen. Lin Mei hung back, suddenly conscious of her work clothes and the dirt under her fingernails. Something about those cars reminded her of the night on the mountain, and it made her uneasy. "Lin Mei." Mr. Chen spotted her and waved her over. "These men are looking for you." Her heart jumped to her throat as she approached. One of the men stepped forward. It was Zhao, the driver who had come to find Wei. "Miss Lin," he said formally, bowing slightly. "Mr. Wei would like to express his gratitude for your assistance. He has sent a gift." From the back of one car, another man removed a large box and placed it on a table that someone had dragged into the square. The whole village seemed to be watching now. "Please." Zhao gestured for her to open it. With trembling fingers, Lin Mei lifted the lid. Inside was an assortment of medicines, expensive ones that the village clinic could never afford. Antibiotics, pain relievers, and treatments for common conditions like high blood pressure and diabetes. Enough to supply the village for months. "Mr. Wei remembered that you mentioned your grandmother was ill," Zhao explained. "He hopes these might be of some use to her and others in your community." Lin Mei stared at the box, emotions warring inside her. Gratitude for such a thoughtful gift battled with pride that whispered she had not helped Wei for a reward. "Please thank Mr. Wei," she said finally. "This is very generous." Zhao nodded, then hesitated. "There is one more thing. Mr. Wei would like to offer you a job." This caught her completely by surprise. "A job? What kind of job?" "He was impressed by your knowledge of medicinal herbs. Wei Pharmaceuticals is starting a new research division focused on traditional Chinese medicine. He believes someone with your practical experience would be valuable to the team." The village square had gone completely silent. Everyone was listening now, wide-eyed at this unexpected turn of events. "But I have no formal education," Lin Mei protested. "I only know what my grandmother taught me." "Mr. Wei said you would say that." Zhao smiled slightly. That's why the offer includes a scholarship to study botany and pharmacology at Shanghai University. All expenses paid, of course. Lin Mei felt dizzy. Shanghai University. These were dreams so distant she had never even dared to form them fully in her mind. I need to think about this, she managed to say, and to discuss it with my grandmother. Zhao handed her an envelope. All the details are in here. Take your time. We'll be staying at the hotel in the next town for 3 days. You can reach us at the number provided when you've made your decision. After they left, the village erupted in excited conversation. Everyone had an opinion. Mrs. Wang thought she should accept immediately. Old Chen warned that city people always had hidden motives. The younger girls looked at her with envy and admiration. Lin Mei slipped away from the commotion and hurried home, the envelope clutched in her hand. Her grandmother was napping when she entered, so she sat quietly at their small table and opened the envelope with care. Inside were several documents, a formal job offer, details about the scholarship, and a handwritten note. Your knowledge and compassion saved my life, it read. Please allow me to offer this opportunity not as charity, but as recognition of your extraordinary gifts. The mountain has wisdom that the city has forgotten. Wei Ling. When her grandmother awoke, Lin Mei showed her everything. The old woman read the papers slowly, her face unreadable. Well, Lin Mei asked finally. What should I do? Grandmother Zhang folded the papers carefully. What do you want to do, child? Lin Mei sank to her knees beside the bed. I don't know. Shanghai is so far away. I can't leave you. Is that your only concern? Lin Mei thought about it. No, she admitted. I'm afraid. What if I fail? What if I don't belong there? What if this is a mistake? Her grandmother stroked her hair gently. When your mother was your age, she was afraid to leave too. But she went to find work in the city because she believed it would give our family a better life. Her voice grew soft. She never got to finish her journey. Perhaps you can finish it for her. But who will take care of you if I go? Did you see that medicine? Mr. Wei seems to be taking care of that already. She smiled. And Mrs. Wang has been offering to let me stay with her family for years. Her son is a doctor at the clinic. I wouldn't be alone. Lin Mei felt tears welling in her eyes. Are you telling me to go? I'm telling you not to let fear make your decision. The mountain has been your whole world, but perhaps it's time to see what lies beyond it. That night, Lin Mei couldn't sleep. She went outside and sat on the small bench in front of their house, looking up at Huangshan Mountain silhouetted against the starry sky. This mountain had been her playground, her teacher, her provider. Could she really leave it behind? As dawn broke, painting the peaks with soft pink light, Lin Mei made her decision. She would accept Wei's offer. Not just for herself, but for her grandmother who had sacrificed so much, for her parents who never got to see their dreams fulfilled, and for the young girl she once was who used to look at airplanes overhead and wonder where they were going. 3 days later, she met with Zhao and gave him her answer. 1 month after that, with her grandmother comfortably settled in Mrs. Wang's larger house, Lin Mei boarded a train to Shanghai with a single suitcase and a heart full of both fear and hope. As the train pulled away from the station, the mountain slowly disappeared from view. Lin Mei pressed her forehead against the window, watching her world shrink into the distance. She had no way of knowing that the mountain and the man she had saved at its foot were about to change her life in ways she could never have imagined. Shanghai swallowed Lin Mei whole. The moment she stepped off the train, the city's enormity hit her like a physical force. Buildings that stretched toward the clouds, streets packed with more people than lived in her entire village, lights that turned night into day, and noise that never seemed to stop. A young woman named Yu was waiting for her at the station holding a sign with Lin Mei's name. She worked for Wei Pharmaceuticals and had been assigned to help Lin Mei settle in. Mr. Wei wanted to greet you himself, Yu explained as they loaded Lin Mei's single suitcase into a sleek car. But he's away on business in Beijing this week. He asked me to make sure you have everything you need. Everything she needed turned out to be far more than Lin Mei could have imagined. The apartment they drove to was small by Shanghai standards, Yu explained. But to Lin Mei it seemed enormous. A 1-bedroom unit with shining wooden floors, new furniture, a kitchen with appliances she didn't recognize, and windows that looked out over the glittering city. This is for me? Lin Mei asked, turning in a slow circle in the center of the living room. Yu nodded. Company housing for scholarship students. The university is just a 15-minute walk away. She handed over a folder. Here's your orientation schedule, campus map, class registration information, and a transit card with enough money for the semester. Oh, and this. She placed a small box on the counter. Mr. Wei said you should have this right away. After Yu left, promising to pick her up for orientation the next morning, Lin Mei sat on the edge of the too-soft sofa and opened the box. Inside was a phone, the newest model, sleek and expensive, with a note. To stay connected with your grandmother and your new world. My number is programmed in if you need anything. Wei Lin Mei's first call was to her grandmother, who laughed with delight at hearing her voice so clearly despite the hundreds of miles between them. Mrs. Wang's son showed me how to use the phone Mr. Wei sent to our house, she explained. Now we can talk whenever we want. The first weeks passed in a blur. Lin Mei felt like she was learning a new language, not just in her classes where the scientific terminology sometimes made her head spin, but in navigating the unspoken rules of city life. How to use the subway, how to order in a restaurant where the menu had no pictures, how to blend in with students who seemed to have been born knowing things she was just discovering. She wrote everything down in a notebook. Questions to ask, words to look up, mistakes not to make again. At night, she would review her notes before calling her grandmother, carefully editing her stories to emphasize the exciting parts and minimize the overwhelming ones. 1 month into the semester, Lin Mei received a message from Wei's assistant asking her to come to the Wei Pharmaceuticals headquarters the following afternoon. Her heart raced as she stood outside the towering glass building, her reflection distorted in its shining surface. She had worn her nicest clothes, the only formal outfit she owned. Purchased with her first stipend payment, the receptionist led her through a maze of hallways to a laboratory where several people in white coats were examining plants under microscopes and making notes on tablets. A man looked up as she entered, Dr. Liu, the head of the Traditional Medicine Research Division, according to the badge on his coat. You must be Lin Mei. We've heard a lot about you. He gestured around the lab. Mr. Wei tells us you have practical knowledge of medicinal herbs that might be valuable to our research. Lin Mei swallowed her nervousness. I only know what my grandmother taught me, and what I learned from gathering on the mountain. Dr. Liu smiled. Sometimes that kind of knowledge is the most valuable kind. Book learning can only take us so far. He showed her around the lab, explaining their current projects, analyzing the chemical compounds in traditional remedies, testing their effectiveness, looking for ways to standardize their production. We'd like you to work here part-time while you study, he said, twice a week, helping us identify plants and sharing your knowledge of their traditional uses. Would that interest you? It was more than interest. It was the first thing since arriving in Shanghai that made Lin Mei feel like herself again. Here, at least, her village knowledge wasn't something to hide, but something to share. She agreed immediately, and that weekend began her work at the lab. The other researchers were kind but distant at first, clearly unsure what to make of this country girl who could identify a plant by the underside of its leaf, but struggled to use the digital catalog system. But as weeks passed, barriers broke down. They taught her scientific methods. She taught them how to tell when a herb was most potent by its smell or the pattern of its veins. 3 months into her time in Shanghai, Lin Mei still hadn't seen Wei Liang in person. He traveled constantly, she learned from the other employees. Europe, America, other parts of Asia, building his pharmaceutical empire. But he sent messages through his assistants, asking about her studies, her work in the lab, whether she needed anything. Then one Thursday afternoon, as Lin Mei was carefully separating leaves from stems at her workstation, a hush fell over the laboratory. She looked up to see everyone suddenly busy, backs a little straighter, voices a little quieter. A moment later, she understood why. Wei Liang walked into the lab, flanked by 2 assistants taking notes as he spoke. He looked different from her memory of the injured man in the cave, taller somehow, more commanding in his perfectly tailored suit, his face no longer pale with pain but animated as he discussed something with Dr. Liu. Lin Mei dropped her eyes back to her work, suddenly conscious of her practical clothes and the dirt under her fingernails from the plant specimens. She didn't expect him to remember her, much less speak to her amid what was clearly an important inspection. And this must be our mountain expert, his voice said suddenly. much closer than she expected. Lin Mei looked up to find Wei standing at her workstation, a warm smile on his face. "Mr. Wei," she stammered, wiping her hands on her lab coat. "It's good to see you fully recovered. Thanks to your excellent care." He glanced down at the plants she was sorting. "White mulberry leaves? For diabetes research?" She nodded, surprised he could identify them. "Yes, my grandmother used to make a tea from these for old Chan when his sugar sickness acted up. Dr. Liu is trying to isolate the compounds that affect blood glucose levels." "Fascinating." He turned to Dr. Liu. "Make sure Lin Mei's grandmother's original preparation methods are documented exactly. Sometimes the traditional processing is as important as the plant itself." Dr. Liu nodded, making a note, and Wei turned back to Lin Mei. "How are you finding Shanghai? Is the apartment comfortable? The class is not too difficult?" "Everything is wonderful," she said automatically, the polite answer she always gave when people asked. But something in Wei's expression made her add, "It's very different from home. Sometimes I feel like I'm on another planet." Wei laughed, a genuine sound that made the serious assistants behind him look startled. "I felt the same way when I first left my village for university." "You grew up in a village?" Lin Mei couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. "Small town, really. Not as remote as yours, but far from all this." He gestured vaguely at the gleaming lab, the city beyond. "My father was a pharmacist, the old kind with jars of dried everything and handwritten prescriptions. That's where all this began." Before Lin Mei could respond, one of the assistants cleared his throat discreetly. "You're 2:00, sir." Wei nodded, then surprised everyone by asking, "Lin Mei, would you join me for dinner this evening? I'd like to hear more about your experience here, and I have a new project I think you might be interested in." That evening found Lin Mei in a private dining room at a restaurant fancier than any she'd ever seen. The table overlooked the Huangpu River and the dazzling lights of the Bund. She wore the same outfit from earlier, having nothing better, but had taken extra care with her hair and borrowed some lip gloss from her dormitory neighbor. Wei arrived exactly on time, now dressed more casually in a simple sweater that probably cost more than all of Lin Mei's possessions combined. He ordered for them both after asking about her preferences, then dismissed the hovering waiter with a polite but firm gesture. "Now we can talk," he said, pouring tea for them both. "Tell me honestly, how are you adapting to city life?" Over dinner, dish after dish of food more delicious than Lin Mei had ever tasted, she found herself telling Wei things she hadn't told anyone, not even her grandmother. How lonely she sometimes felt among thousands of people, how her classmates were kind but treated her like a curiosity, how she missed the mountain air and the sound of birds in the morning. Wei listened intently, asking questions that showed he was truly hearing her, not just being polite. He shared some of his own story too, his father's small pharmacy, his mother's determination that he get an education, his early struggles at university where other students mocked his provincial accent. "But you became successful," Lin Mei observed as dessert arrived. Wei smiled. "Success didn't happen overnight. It took years of work, some luck, and people who believed in me when I was nothing special." He set down his teacup. "Which brings me to why I asked you here tonight. I have a proposal." He explained that Wei Pharmaceuticals was launching a major initiative focused on traditional Chinese medicine, specifically remedies from rural areas that had never been scientifically studied. They needed someone to lead field research, someone who understood both the scientific method and the cultural context of traditional healing. "I think you could be that person. Once you finish your degree," he said. "The position would involve traveling to remote areas, interviewing local healers, collecting specimens, essentially building a bridge between their knowledge and our laboratories." Lin Mei's eyes widened. "But that would take years of training. I've barely started my education, which is why we'd create a specialized track for you. Coursework focused on ethnobotany and pharmacognosy, internships in our labs, mentorship from our senior researchers. By the time you graduate, you'd be uniquely qualified." He leaned forward slightly. "It would be challenging, but I think you're up to the challenge." Lin Mei stared out at the glittering river, her mind racing. This wasn't just a job offer. It was a future she had never imagined possible. A way to honor her grandmother's knowledge while stepping into a new world. "Why me?" she asked finally. "There must be better qualified people." Wei's expression grew serious. The night you found me on that mountain, you knew exactly which plants might help reduce pain and prevent infection. You applied them correctly using methods passed down through generations. That knowledge is dying out, Lin Mei. Grandmothers pass away without teaching grandchildren who are too busy looking at smartphones. Villages empty as young people move to cities. He gestured at the Shanghai skyline beyond the window. We gain all this, but what do we lose? As they parted ways later that evening, Wei handed her a thick folder detailing the proposed program. Take your time, he said. This would be a significant commitment. Talk to your grandmother, your professors. Make sure it's right for you. That night, Lin Mei couldn't sleep. She stood at her apartment window, looking out at the city that had felt so alien 3 months ago but was slowly becoming familiar. In her hand, she held the smooth stone her grandmother had pressed into her palm before she left, a piece of Huangshan Mountain to keep with her always. For the first time since arriving in Shanghai, Lin Mei felt the pieces of her life coming together instead of pulling apart. Perhaps she didn't have to choose between honoring her past and building a future. Perhaps, like the herbs she studied, the most powerful medicine came from combining elements that at first seemed to have nothing in common. 5 years passed like the changing seasons on Huangshan Mountain, each day blending into the next until suddenly, looking back, Lin Mei could hardly recognize the shy village girl who had once stepped off the train in Shanghai with a single suitcase and a heart full of uncertainty. Today, she stood on a stage in her graduation cap and gown, accepting her diploma with honors in pharmaceutical botany and ethnomedicine. From her seat in the front row, Grandmother Zhang watched with tears streaming down her weathered face. Beside the old woman sat Wei Liang, applauding with genuine pride. After the ceremony, as families gathered for photographs and celebrations, Wei approached with a small wrapped package. A graduation gift, he said, handing it to Lin Mei. Though it hardly seems adequate for all you've accomplished. Inside was a beautiful wooden box, hand-carved with images of mountain herbs and flowers. When she opened it, Lin Mei gasped. It contained a collection of seeds, dozens of tiny packets, each meticulously labeled in her grandmother's handwriting. Your grandmother sent these from the village, Wei explained. Seeds from plants that grow only on Huangshan. She thought you might want to grow a piece of home wherever your work takes you next. Lin Mei touched the packets gently, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift. Thank you, she whispered, unable to find better words. Wei smiled. Don't thank me. This was entirely your grandmother's idea. My gift is somewhat less poetic. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a contract, official confirmation of the position they had discussed that night by the river 5 years ago. Lin Mei was to be the director of the new ethnobotanical research division at Wei Pharmaceuticals, with a team of researchers under her supervision and a budget that made her eyes widen. Is this real? She asked, looking up at Wei. Very real, he replied. You've earned it. Your research combining traditional preparations with modern extraction methods has already led to 2 patent applications. The board approved your appointment unanimously. Later that evening, Lin Mei sat with her grandmother in the small garden behind her apartment building. Over the years, she had gradually transformed the neglected space into a miniature version of the mountain slopes she had once roamed, growing medicinal herbs between decorative flowers, teaching her neighbors which plants could ease a cough or settle a stomach. I'm so proud of you, Grandmother Zhang said, her voice softer now than it once had been, but her eyes still sharp and clear. Your parents would be proud too. I couldn't have done any of it without you, Lin Mei replied, pouring tea for them both. Everything I know began with your teachings, the old woman smiled. No, I taught you about plants. But your strength, your kindness, those were always inside you. She sipped her tea thoughtfully. And this Mr. Wei, he has been good to our family. Lin Mei nodded, thinking about how Wei had arranged for her grandmother to move to Shanghai 2 years ago, when her health had begun to decline. He had found them a ground-floor apartment near Lin Mei's, with wide doorways that accommodated the wheelchair Grandmother Zhang now sometimes needed. He had made sure the old woman received the best medical care without ever making it feel like charity. He is a good man, Lin Mei agreed. I've learned so much working with him. Her grandmother gave her a knowing look. Is that all he is to you? A good man and a teacher? Lin Mei felt her cheeks grow warm. Grandmother! He's my employer. Was all the old woman said. but her eyes twinkled. The truth was more complicated than Lin Mei wanted to admit, even to herself. Over the years, her relationship with Wei had evolved from gratitude to respect to friendship. They had worked closely together, especially in the last 2 years as she helped design the new research division. They shared meals often, discussing projects and ideas. Sometimes their conversations stretched late into the evening, moving from medicine to philosophy, from business to personal dreams. Wei had never behaved inappropriately, had always maintained a professional boundary between them. But sometimes she caught him looking at her with an expression that made her heart beat faster. And sometimes she found herself thinking about him at odd moments of the day. 2 weeks after graduation, Lin Mei began her new position. Her office overlooked the Shanghai skyline, a far cry from the tiny wooden house where she had grown up. On her desk sat a photograph of Huangshan Mountain, a reminder of where she came from. Her team consisted of 12 researchers, some fresh from university, others with decades of experience. Some, like Dr. Chen, came from traditional medicine backgrounds and spoke the language of yin and yang, heat and cold. Others, like Dr. Tao, were thoroughly modern scientists who communicated in molecules and compounds. Lin Mei's job was to help them speak to each other. Their first major project took her back to where it all began. Wei Pharmaceuticals was developing a new pain reliever based on the herb mixture Lin Mei had used on Wei's injuries that night on the mountain. Early clinical trials showed promising results, effective relief without the addictive properties or side effects of existing medications. One evening, as Lin Mei was reviewing lab results in her office, Wei knocked on her open door. "Still working?" "It's past 8, he said, leaning against the door frame. Lin Mei looked up with a tired smile. "Just finishing some notes on the clinical data. The results are even better than we hoped." Wei nodded. "That's what I came to tell you. The review board approved phase 3 trials this afternoon. If all goes well, we could have approval within 18 months. That's wonderful news." Lin Mei stood up, genuinely excited. Years of work were coming to fruition. "We should celebrate," Wei suggested. "Have you eaten?" "There's a new restaurant on the Bund I've been meaning to try." The restaurant was quiet and elegant with a terrace overlooking the water. As they settled at a table with a view of the illuminated Oriental Pearl Tower, Lin Mei found herself studying Wei's face. 5 years had added a few subtle lines around his eyes, a touch of silver at his temples. But he looked healthier than when she'd first met him, less driven by stress, more at peace. "What are you thinking?" he asked, noticing her gaze. "I was remembering how different you looked that night in the cave," she admitted, pale and in pain. "It's strange to think that if you hadn't crashed your car, none of this would have happened." Wei's expression grew thoughtful. "I've thought about that many times. What if it had been raining harder and you hadn't seen the crash? What if you had walked past thinking someone else would help? What if you had been gathering herbs on a different part of the mountain that day? But none of those things happened," Lin Mei said softly. "No, instead a brave young woman risked her safety to help a stranger." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I never properly thanked you for that night." Lin Mei felt her pulse quicken. "You've thanked me many times. The scholarship, the job, everything you've done for my grandmother." Wei shook his head. "Those weren't thanks. They were investments in someone extraordinary." His eyes held hers. "Lin Mei, you would have succeeded with or without my help. Your talent, your compassion, your intelligence, those are yours, not something I gave you." Lin Mei found herself unable to look away from his gaze. "I don't know if that's true, but I'm grateful for the opportunities you've provided. There you go again, giving me credit for your achievements." Wei smiled, still holding her hand. "I have a confession to make. That night in the cave when I was drifting in and out of consciousness, I thought you might be a spirit of the mountain. You appeared out of nowhere in the storm, knew exactly which plants could ease my pain, sang songs I didn't understand but somehow comforted me." Lin Mei laughed softly. "Just an ordinary village girl, I'm afraid. No magic powers. I disagree." Wei's expression grew serious again. "Lin Mei, I've wanted to say this for a long time. My feelings for you have grown beyond professional admiration or friendship, but our situations have been complicated. You as a student, me as your sponsor, later as your employer. I never wanted you to feel pressured or obligated." Lin Mei's heart pounded in her ears. "And now you've graduated with honors. You've proven yourself to everyone in the company. Your position is secure regardless of anything between us personally. He took a deep breath. I care for you deeply, Lin Mei. If you don't feel the same way, nothing will change professionally. But if there's any chance... Lin Mei found herself thinking of her grandmother's knowing look, of the moments over the years when she had felt a connection to Wei that went beyond their work together. I care for you too, she said quietly. But I've never allowed myself to think about it seriously. The differences between us seemed too great. Wei's fingers tightened around hers. What differences? We both come from simple beginnings. We both love the work we do. We both believe in preserving traditional knowledge while embracing scientific progress. You're one of the richest men in Shanghai, Lin Mei pointed out. I'm still the same village girl at heart. That village girl is exactly who I admire most, Wei replied. Your roots are your strength, Lin Mei, not something to overcome or be ashamed of. As they talked late into the night, Lin Mei felt something shift inside her, as if puzzle pieces that had been floating separately were finally clicking into place. The path that had begun with a crashed car on a rainy night had led her here, to this moment, to this man who saw her not for where she came from or what she lacked, but for who she truly was. 6 months later, Lin Mei stood once again on Huangshan Mountain. This time Wei was beside her and they were surrounded by the people of her village. Grandmother Zhang sat in a place of honor, beaming with joy. They had come home to celebrate not just Lin Mei and Wei's engagement, but also the groundbreaking of a new research center that would be built near the village. Local healers would work alongside scientists, documenting and analyzing generations of medicinal knowledge. Young people from the village would have opportunities for education and employment without having to leave their homes and families. As the sun set behind the familiar peaks, painting the clouds in shades of gold and pink, Lin Mei felt Wei's hand slip into hers. Happy? He asked softly. Lin Mei looked around at the gathering, her grandmother who had taught her everything, the villagers who had once whispered that poor girl, but now looked at her with pride. The mountain that had been her first home and teacher. More than happy, she replied. Whole. The mountain stood silent and ancient above them, unchanged by the passing of time or the small human dramas that played out at its feet. Yet Lin Mei liked to think it was watching, approving of the full circle her journey had taken, from the foot of the mountain to the heights of Shanghai and back again, bringing with her not just the knowledge she had gained but a bridge between worlds that had seemed impossibly far apart. The poor girl, who had once saved a stranger in the rain, had indeed had her life changed by a tycoon, but in the end, she had changed his life too, reminding him of the wisdom found in simple things, in ancient ways, in compassionate hearts. Together, they would build something that honored both their pasts while creating a future neither could have imagined alone.